If there's an opportunity to have a conversation early doors, then have it, because it's good to understand what your loved one would be happy to have as support.
You're listening to the Care Podcast, brought to you by Unique Senior Care. We're here to share open, honest and practical conversations to help you better navigate the care journey, whatever stage you're at. In today's episode, we welcome Sophie Ledbrook, our Head of Live-in Care at Unique Senior Care. Sophie has a wealth of experience in the care industry, having started as a carer herself and over 20 years progressed through different manager roles and is now the head of our live-in service. Welcome, Sophie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So one of the things that we're thinking about in this episode is how can you tell when someone is at that stage where maybe they need some more support and living alone isn't going to be a viable or a safe option for them anymore?
I think one of the first things that I will say is people really do wait until maybe a critical point, until they get care involved. And that's usually because their loved one is so used to living alone, being independent, having routines, that bringing someone else into the household can be quite a scary thing. And then what we find is, although people have started to notice things smaller along the way, they really do wait for them to build up before any action's taken. And when I say small things, it could be the house is just a little bit untidy, washing up, piling up, or clothes looking a little bit unkempt and those sorts of things. But they sometimes pass them off as really small things without realising that they're going to build to something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so actually that's a change in what is usual for that person and it needs noticing.
Absolutely. And I think what happens is, although they're being noticed, if people haven't been on a care journey before, they don't really know that they could potentially build up to something bigger and that being needed, such as care in the future.
So what do you think is a way that maybe families can start those conversations without feeling pushy or like they're taking away the independence of that person?
Yeah, because I think dignity can be the biggest thing as well, is families and loved ones don't want to take away that person's dignity, and they can feel that having those conversations can be quite intrusive to the person, and it can be a really fine line as a daughter, a son, a husband or wife to start having, I suppose, those difficult conversations with their loved ones. And I think I would always say the best recommendation is trying to understand if there is any support needed without asking direct questions, because then people can become defensive and then you don't sort of get to the root of the problem.
So how could you do that without asking a direct question? What kind of things could you say or do?
You could let on what you've been noticing around the household. So sort of lightly saying, oh, I've noticed washing up's not been done for 2 days, for example. Oh, we'll have to start getting someone in to help with the cleaning. And then you don't know what sort of conversations they might open up, like, well, I actually have been really struggling to keep on top of it. I think people are worried about the word care. So maybe using the word home help. Maybe we need to look at some home help for you, because that can feel a bit less intrusive as well.
Yeah, that has a whole different feel, doesn't it? Someone to come and help you, or someone to help keep on top of the cleaning or the housework, is going to be perceived very differently to, you need a carer, we want to get a carer in because you're not coping anymore.
Yeah, just thinking about my own grandparents, like when my nan needed care and we could see the deterioration in her. She's so dignified and so respectful of her own home, so independent. There's no way we would have been able to get a caregiver into my nan's house. Our approach was, let's get a cleaner in once a fortnight, on the basis that we thought they'll build a good relationship, she'll start to trust that person, and then we can use that as an avenue to sort of get a bit more help and support in, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, so it worked well for your grandma.
Yeah, and I've used it as well with clients that we've taken on board as well. especially when they've been so reluctant to have care. It's how do we get in without anyone feeling like someone's coming in to take over their home and take over their lives, and trying to build a companion out of that person instead. And then, you usually do see that those avenues open up.
So that relationship building and getting the trust is really the essential bit.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you're seeing someone coming into your home to help you and seeing them as a bit of a friend and something you do things with, such as activities, that sort of thing, as time goes on and you may need more, you're more likely to let that person in that you've already built that relationship with, that is there in a professional capacity anyway.
So you mentioned that sometimes, or quite often actually, people leave it until it gets to crisis point. But what would you say is the stage at which care becomes essential, really, that you need to make that move?
I think it is really what you're noticing with your loved one. For me personally, I think if you're at a point where you're noticing that your loved one has taken to their bed, they are falling regularly, they're not doing half of the things that they used to do, there's a deterioration in their health or medical conditions, I think when you see that happening, it can really rapidly decline, that you feel like you've lost grasp on that almost. Whereas the smaller signs, such as they may not be having that shower every day that they used to, and it's now gone down to twice a week, or they were doing things, or they were very house proud and those standards have slipped. They're your really early signs. But when you can see that these medical conditions are declining and there's mobility issues and people taking to their bed and letting their personal hygiene standards drop considering what they would normally be, then I think, that could really rapidly decline quickly if you're not on top of it.
And if there was one takeaway that you could give us on this topic of, how do you notice the small signs and how do you start that conversation before it gets to crisis point, what would that be?
I think the takeaway for me would be, if there's an opportunity to have a conversation early doors, then have it, because it's good to understand what your loved one would be happy to have as support. So, for example, if they needed care in the future, what that would actually look like for them. I think having that understanding very early doors can make those conversations a lot less difficult when they need to be had, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Sophie.
You're welcome.
And thank you to everyone for listening. We hope that this episode has helped you to feel more confident and informed around the options for living care. I've been your host, Jo Cleary, from the Care Podcast. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode.